Hi everyone, Lucky here. So today I wanted to do my first ever movie review for a movie I watched, which I'm sure all of you have probably seen by now, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it. I'm doing this for a reason because I extremely enjoyed this movie, and I'm probably going to be getting into some spoilers, but definitely if you want a recommendation, I say watch this film, and this is Project Hail Mary. And as you guys know, it's based off of Andy Weir's book. Now, I haven't read the book, but I have seen people talk about it online, and I think it's really interesting what little I've heard of kind of like tidbits from the book of like things they didn't include in the movie, which I think is really interesting to just kind of see because it just kind of gives like a fuller picture to kind of what you have seen, knowing things from the book in particular. But yeah, I mean, the movie literally has everything you could possibly ask for. There's like great build up to everything. There's the mystery of kind of like who he is and how he ended up in this situation, and like and maybe I'm partial to Ryan Gosling, but he did an incredible job in this film. I feel like also the way this character is written, you just fall in love with him along the way. He's such a likable guy and character, and I don't know. And the more you watch it, the more you just love every bit of it. And then I feel like when it really picks up and when it gets super cute is when you finally get introduced to Rocky. And Rocky, I think, is just the literal star of the show. I loved their dynamic. It was my like favorite thing in the world. I think that's just the heart of the movie is the relationship that he develops. Dr. Grace does with Rocky. I think it's just so cute and so sweet. But yeah, there was like a lot of things that twists and turns for sure that really surprised me that I was not expecting at all when I was watching it. Yeah, and I mean, I think, and again, spoiler, but I especially did not expect the scene of like when he goes to like save him, and then I was thinking like, oh my gosh, because like I was so worried about what would happen to Rocky, because obviously taking that risk of like saving Dr. Grace, and it's so sad because I mean like knowing just like the nuances of the movie and that particular part of like he watched his own crewmates die, Rocky did, and he did not want to sit there and watch this like person and this being who he got to know and become his friend and who he cared about die. And so he was willing to literally risk his own life to help him. And like a lot of people said, if you end up seeing in the movie he has like a scar on his forearm later on that they show, and a lot of people were saying it was from Rocky like grabbing him and clawing him to try to hook him up to like the stuff in like the hospital kind of bay in the ship, and like that he literally would have like burned his arm like touching him, because obviously you could see there was smoke kind of emanating from him like from being in his atmosphere. I'm assuming the oxygen was like literally like burning him alive like in his atmosphere. And I just did not want to believe it. I remember sitting there and being like, he's not dead. He's not dead. I do that all the time. I'm like, I never believe anyone is like dead. I'm like, he can't. He can't. And then the fact that it went on for so like long, I was just like, it was just devastating because you're just thinking there's no way. And then I'm like, what am I like, I'm literally thinking, what am I holding out for? Like I should just I need to like accept, but like I didn't want to. And oh my god, it's just, I mean, it's just pure joy, but still sad. Like when he finally, realizes he's okay, and the lights turn back on when he comes back in, and he gives him that hug too, the way he hugged him before and giving him that hug. And like how he leans in first, Rocky does. There's just so many like great little things about the film. I mean, I think that's just like what makes it so brilliant. It's the little things along the way that you just end up loving. And just random things too. Like I literally did not expect, especially the part with particularly Dr. Strat. I had seen someone say something about like Harry Styles signed to the Times, and I thought they were just making an edit with his music, and I was like, no, she sings this song. I did not expect that for her to like roll up to the karaoke and suddenly start singing Harry Styles signed to the Times, and I was like, what? And that was an interesting dynamic too, their relationship. Oh my gosh, just fascinating, especially like reading and seeing what people said about kind of the book versus the movie, because a lot of people, cutting in with a voiceover here, so I learned later on about the karaoke scene with Sandra Hüller. Ryan Gosling talked about how he had discovered that she could sing, because apparently she was singing in the hallway or something, and he overheard her, and he was like, "You have to sing in the movie." So he was trying to convince her to do this karaoke scene, basically. She didn't really want to do it. I think she was kind of hesitant, and she said, "Okay, I will only do it if I get to pick the song." And obviously, he made fun of the fact that she picked Harry Styles' song. He kind of joked and said, "Okay, couldn't you have picked something a little less expensive?" But I thought that was funny how he encouraged her to sing in the movie, because she did a really good job in that scene. I was really surprised at her singing, and I know that's a favorite scene of people in the movie as well. They thought that they had a romantic connotation kind of in the movie with the way they were kind of like dancing around with their relationship or whatever. I think it was just kind of the longing looks and everything. But it's very interesting because like all the actors and Andy Weir himself, they were both like they were all kind of saying that essentially that's not how they were trying to wanted people to view it or do it when they were trying to act it out. I think they were doing it like more like a mutual respect for each other's like minds essentially and their intelligence, and respecting each other for essentially like what the other person is doing and has to offer in contribution to overall the whole project. But I don't know, it did give undertones of kind of like I was thinking the same thing of like maybe, and I mean in like they were kind of even explaining if circumstances were different and not so dire and almost apocalyptic, maybe they could have possibly, I don't know, ended up together. But I just think it's kind of interesting that there was that slight undertone in the movie. But a lot of people say that, and again, I think, you know, art is interpretive, right? Like, you know, it's based on like, you know, I feel like it's objective, but then with the sense of like we come in and we're, you know, we have different experiences and different lenses that we view it in, and then we have different interpretations. And I think that's what makes it so interesting is that the way people maybe view the movie or even the book, I think a lot of people honestly feel like the way it was like interpreted in the book, that they felt like it was again more professional compared to what they were doing with the movie. That again, just the mutual respect of kind of like two intelligent minds coming together, not that they were trying to do anything particularly like romantic there at all, which I think is like very interesting, the fact that people were kind of getting a different feeling from the movie. And I mean, that does just happen, right? Sometimes they just choose to do things differently. Like one thing, for example, that they did differently from the book is a lot of people were saying it was 10 times more traumatic, the scene where Strat essentially makes the decision for him to send him up into space, and ultimately him losing all his like autonomy, even though he's saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And like a big thing that I don't think he said it in the movie, but like a line he says in the book is like, you're gonna, like, you're murdering me. And people were saying it was just completely kind of like almost like darker in the book and more like upsetting to see completely, just because I don't think, obviously, like he did not want to do this, and he made it very clear. And I don't think he really had come to kind of that acceptance at all. And you see that definitely in the movie, that he had not, this was something he was forced into, and he had not made peace with the fact that he might have to, that he's going to die at the end of this. And this is not something that he volunteered himself for. But I think it's interesting to see that they say that he was always kind of the backup. This insinuation that I think she had him there all along in case need be, but never obviously explicitly told him that, with him just presuming I'm just on this project aiding and helping, not that I'm gonna have to potentially go into space myself. But I think it's interesting the details that, people notice with all of that. And I think a big thing, too, that I kind of wish, like a lot of people were saying happened in the book that I wish they would have done in the movie, too, is the fact that they said you could really see that he truly loved his kids with the teaching. Like, they said he particularly called them, like, his kids, my children, like, the way he spoke about them. And, like, people were saying one thing they did differently is when they first bring him on, like, they, she shows up to his class and takes him and, like, I need you to help me with this, with the, the Petrovaline and the astrophage and figuring out what this stuff is, which, like I said, ended up being astrophage. He actually comes back to the class after that, and then they were saying in the book he literally like leaves the classroom almost like in a panic attack, like this realization of like these kids are gonna have to live in this type of world, and I could make a difference, and I could go on board this project and help, and like ultimately feeling like this is what I should do, and then going back to her and saying yes, that I want to join your project. Just a different sequencing than what they did in the movie, obviously, where he was already there and then agreed to take, like, I'm going to do this project. So I think they figured they could probably condense the teacher stuff kind of at the beginning, but I feel like what it ended up doing is, like, later on, I think when he got taken, literally, like, lost, like I said, his choice to be on the ship, and she's like, you're doing this, and when he's sitting in her office talking about this, one of his, like, kind of excuses, as she sees it as, was him talking about my kids, or, like, the kids that I teach, and that, like, I have to stay for them, and I can't go, and, like, and her saying that, that it's shameful or embarrassing that he's, like, literally using that as an excuse. And I do feel like maybe that's why they didn't want to hype up kind of the relationship. That I do really think he genuinely loved teaching and loved his job and loved what he did, but it felt like there was that, like, lack of that in the movie to just a minimal extent. Like, I could tell he loved what he did, but I feel like they purposely did it that way because they wanted you to understand in that scene that there was different reasons, as to, like, it was obviously selfish kind of reasons of probably, like, wondering, like, what is it exactly that's stopping him from willing to agree to this and go on to this ship, like this possibility of, like, almost like a what if could play out on Earth of what, possibly of what your life could be in the next several years, and not knowing that, and it seeming more like a little bit more of a selfish thing rather than, oh, I'm doing this for other people in particular. But I don't know, I just think it's very interesting to read a lot of the different things, like the differences between the book and the movie. And even with the relationships too, like one thing that was different is him kind of nodding to having a prior relationship in the movie, like having a past relationship with a girlfriend, and then they said kind of a little bit in the book, this insinuation of kind of just more like having this fear of rejection was more like what they focused on in the book, and saying that that's kind of why he would push people away or didn't really have any friends or relationships with anyone, was more like he was fearful of being rejected, and so ultimately never really, like, opened up to people or showed his true self, which I think is a very interesting nod back to the research paper that he wrote and being rejected from the science community. That's why I almost think it's very interesting how they pose it that way rather than it being maybe simply being rejected in like romantic relationships, because they feel like he was rejected from that community, which obviously was really hard on him too, considering that seems like such a big part of his identity is like loving science and, you know, obviously, because that's what the whole movie's about. But yeah, oh my gosh, that movie was just, it hits all the right notes. It's just utterly perfect and brilliant, and I would recommend it to anyone, honestly. It is great from start to finish, and I know it's really long-winded, but I didn't watch it all in one sitting. I kind of like chopped it up into like two halves, if that's a little easier for you. I think a good kind of like stopping point in between, honestly, is I kind of like stopped it right when Rocky was like, I'm about to move into your ship. So I do feel like that's like a little bit of a good stopping point if you don't want to sit for the long-winded, like kind of split it up into two parts, because I feel like if you come back the next day and watch it, like you still, it's a good place to kind of just like stop, I feel like. Where, you know, because sometimes there's bad places, you know, to stop, right? Like it's getting suspenseful or you feel like it's heading towards an intense moment. And I feel like it just chops it up kind of perfectly if you kind of want to watch it in two parts and not watch it all in one sitting. But obviously, your preference. That's just something I ended up doing or whatever when I was like casually watching the movie. But yeah, I mean, this movie is just brilliant. And if you ever want to see more kind of info on it or whatever, a lot of where I learned a lot of this stuff, ironically, was TikTok and online. The book readers sharing a lot of these tidbits and facts, which I don't know, just makes it more interesting. Just kind of gives you, like I said, a more whole picture of like what they were trying to go for in the movie. Because you know they can't cram everything in, right? Like, obviously, it's a very long movie as it is. So, you know, it's hard to condense a book down kind of like that. You want to leave a little bit of everything in, but you always can't. So, yeah. But I thoroughly enjoyed Project Hail Mary, and it's a thumbs up for me. So, yeah, let me know if you end up watching it, and comment down below. Tell me if you have, or if you're planning on, you know, watching it, and maybe tell me like what your favorite scene or your favorite part of the movie was. I would love to know, and maybe any more like facts. We could have a whole discussion down there. Anything, if you're a book reader and you would love to share more information, I would love that too. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and stay lucky. Bye.